Hey everyone, Wayne Fox here. I wasn't really planning this video, but I thought I should do a quick video to talk a little bit about some of the issues you can run into when you use a dock. I've reviewed a lot of docks over the years. I've got 5 right here. I've got another one behind me. Several I've reviewed that I don't have anymore. I should be selling some of these, I guess. But there are a couple of issues that I really never thought much about, and lately I've become a little more aware of them. One of them I had no clue was going on, and it's actually kind of a challenge because some docks are going to handle this situation better than others. The other issue is just understanding bandwidth, and all docks will basically be the same with this. You know, what am I talking about? Well, it might be easier just to show you. Let me just demonstrate both of these things and what you might run into. So when you're buying a dock, there are things you might want to think about, especially if you're connecting a couple of docks, and what devices you might want to use so the bandwidth is used adequately and you get what you're really after. So we're going to use this 1M2. This is a new enclosure from OWC. And in my testing, I've got 3 that I kind of settled on. And it's a little bigger and bulkier than the others, but it might be the best. Now, this is a USB 4 enclosure, which means it is compatible with Thunderbolt 3, which is the same speed, basically, as Thunderbolt 4. And we're going to use Apple's very expensive $69 Thunderbolt 4 cable. Now, this is probably the best Thunderbolt cable money can buy, but we're just going to make sure the cable isn't a factor here. We're going to plug this directly into the Mac, and we're going to do a speed test using disk speed test from Blackmagic. And you've noticed that I've also got on the screen this utility, which lets me monitor the temperature. And so we can watch that Western Digital Black. I've run this test for 4 or 5 minutes. As you can see, we're getting about 3,400 megabytes a second read and 3,400 megabytes a second write. And I can run this for 3 or 4 minutes. Every once in a while, the write will slow down, but then the next cycle, it's a 5 gigabyte file back and forth. It picks right back up. So that's what we're going to get from the internal Thunderbolt. And this is a USB 4 device, which is using Thunderbolt 3, 40 gigabits per second bandwidth to transfer data. So now I'm going to use the one side of the Evanke dock. If you didn't watch my video, this is actually 2 Thunderbolt docks built into one cabinet or one chassis. There's 2 layers. They're each their own card. They're completely independent of each other. The only thing they share is the power supply. You can actually hook up one cable to one side of the dock, and only that side will work. The cable they give you will plug in the 2 Thunderbolt ports at the same time. So basically each layer is plugged into its own port on the Mac. And I've disconnected my displays, as you can see. This port here on the front is actually, it's labeled a 6K display port, but it actually is a Thunderbolt port. Kind of a weird deal. Anyway, now that we've got it plugged in there, let's go ahead and do a disk speed test. And let's just, let's make sure we have our drive selected, and that's it. And now let's see what kind of speed we get. Now you notice the temperature is fine. Right now that Western Digital Black is only 104 degrees. This SSD I think is rated at around 140, and I've actually tested it at length at that temperature, and it doesn't slow down. But you'll notice we're now about 20% slower than we were directly to the Mac. Now, if you have a slower device like the Acasis that I have, which can only get about 2,800 megabytes a second connected directly to the Mac, it really doesn't lose anything when I plug into the dock, as long as there's no displays connected. But it looks like some of the docks, they kind of have an upper limit, and about 2,800 megabytes a second seems to be the fastest you'll get connected to a dock, versus faster with some of these devices connected to directly to the MacBook Pro. For example, this one by Satechi or whatever, it'll also give me 3,400 megabytes a second, similar to the OWC, but only 28 if I plug it into a dock. Now watch what happens. We're going to now plug in the 4K display, and let's just watch what happens there. Now my 4K display is running, and you'll see that now I've at 2200 in my right. I'm still getting about the same in the read, but I've dropped down to 2200 with my right, where I was 3400. So I've lost another 20% of my speed in the right. Now, I don't have another 4K display. I'm gonna go ahead and plug in my 2K display, and let's see if that has any effect. And now we've got the 2K display plugged in. My Windows went over to it. There we go. And now I'm down to 1500 right. It's interesting, it doesn't seem to affect the read, but the best I can do is 1500 right if these displays are plugged into the same layer and sharing the bandwidth with my two displays. That really surprised me. So I sort of discovered this working on the Evanke, and I was having a little bit of trouble. But what I found out was a 4K display requires about 16 gigabits per second of bandwidth. Now, you've got a 40 gigabit per second connection. If you've got two 4K displays, you've only got about 8 gigabits per second left over, and yet you're trying to get, that's only going to give you maybe 800 megabytes a second of transfer speed with your device. And of course, you probably have Ethernet plugged in there. In my case, I've got an Ethernet. I've got several USB devices. I'm plugged into a capture card, which is trying to bring 4K from HDMI in. And now I realize why sometimes my Camlink 4K stutters, because the displays are taking all the bandwidth. Now, I know it's not quite that simple because there's a lot of ability to compress that data. This would be a raw data stream. I don't know what compression these devices are doing. I don't know how it comes out of the Mac. I'm going over HDMI. But the bottom line is, as we add displays and use up bandwidth, we're taking bandwidth away from what we need for our storage devices. And to be honest, if we want 3,300 megabytes a second, we don't have a lot of bandwidth left over for things like displays. And that's kind of the limit of Thunderbolt 4, which I really never thought of before. Now, Thunderbolt 5 promises to change that because we have double the bandwidth, and in some cases even triple the bandwidth if it's only going one direction. But as it stands now, if you're buying a Thunderbolt 4 dock or a Thunderbolt 3 dock and you start hooking up displays, you might lose some throughput to your storage devices or even things like your video capture cards. Never thought of it before. Kind of dumb for a guy that reviews a lot of docks, I know. So this is what gets really weird. I don't know whose fault it is. I've got a CalDigit TS4 hub, which is, by all what I thought is a great device, use it for a long time. I've got my new USB 4 OWC drive, which works in Thunderbolt 3 when it's available. It's a 40 gigabit per second device. I've plugged it into the CalDigit Thunderbolt port, which should be a Thunderbolt 4 port, or Thunderbolt, it's a TS4, so it should be a Thunderbolt 4 port, which means it's USB 4 compatible. It should be using Thunderbolt. Let's run a speed test real quick. Make sure we have the right one. And that's it. 920 megabytes a second. Read and write. What? Why would it be so slow? So what I did is I took a look with system information to see what I could see. And this is what's odd. Let's stop this. Let's bring up system information. Here's our OWC Express 1M2. You'll see that it's running at up to 10 gigabits per second. So for some reason, this hub has decided that this is a USB 3.2 device, even though it's a USB 4 and Thunderbolt 3 compatible device. There's something going on here, and that means I can't trust the CalDigit. I'm gonna actually plug my other two devices in to see if it makes the same mistake. So now I have my little Acasis with I think it's got a Samsung 990 Evo Plus, the new one in it. And you'll see here that it reports as a Thunderbolt 3 device plugged into the Thunderbolt 4 port. Now, I don't know if the case this is actually, I think it is, I'm not sure if it's sold as Thunderbolt 3. I know it will connect to USB ports fine. That's kind of not the point of the video, but it's reporting to the right one. Let's try the Satechi, or Sateki, or Satet. I guess I should look up how you say that. Let's try it to see how it reports. Okay, let's refresh the information. And now let's find the Thunderbolt side of this. There's the TS4, and it's reporting as a USB 4 SSD Pro enclosure, 40 gigabits per second. So the only one that seems to have the problem is the OWC. For some reason, they're not jiving. Well, I don't know how to trust stuff anymore, and I guess I'm gonna have to be a little more thorough in my testing. Now, I really don't want to point the finger to either of these companies. I don't know if it's actually either of their faults. This could actually be one of the issues, the fact that they're USB 4 devices. And unfortunately, the USB standard over the years has been notorious about compatibility issues. There's really not a responsible group that certifies it, and it could be the two chips they're happening to use just don't jive. And I will say that the OWC drive works fine in the Avanki dock, and it works fine in all of my OWC docks. But everything works pretty good with my CalDigit except for the one OWC. The other drives work good, so it's really kind of a weird situation. But that just goes to show you, if you're going to buy a dock, there might be some issues that you're not aware of. Unfortunately, docks aren't just a plug and play kind of thing. There's more to them than that. And if you really want to maximize your throughput, you're probably going to have to do a little more research. Now, when I test docks in the future, I promise I'll be testing things like this. How does it handle various external enclosures? What happens to the speed when you plug in devices? Now, if you're trying to just connect displays, maybe that's a good thing. And maybe I should get a couple displays when I review these docks so I can put them through the paces. But in my case, my displays, they're great, but I really want great bandwidth, especially when I'm doing some pretty heavy duty importing, exporting. Now, I don't stress my drives. You know, the video work pushes them quite a bit, not like high-end video guys. And those guys, if you're using a dock and you just want to hook everything up with one plug, you're probably not going to get away with it if you want really high-speed data saving and a really, an 8K display, for example, going to take up almost all your bandwidth. But anyway, like I said, this is just kind of a quick video. I really didn't plan it too well. Kind of a, sorry about that, but I just wanted to get it out there. A lot more to docks, and you might want to review it. Now, what am I going to do? My plan probably is to have a small dock that only connects my displays, and another dock, a good quality dock, that only connects my other devices. So my display bandwidth won't really hurt anything, my storage devices. And when I use my small portable device, which when I'm on the road, it plugs straight in. When I'm at home, I typically just sync it over to my local storage, but I probably won't plug it into a dock just to get the fastest speed I can. Well, hope you found that interesting. I was sure surprised. And I'll have this video about these little SSD cabinets. What I did there was I watched about 10 or 12 YouTube videos. I picked the three that seem to be the consensus of the most, other than the OWC. It hasn't been reviewed by many yet, and it's a pretty good device, other than it's really not compatible with my TS4, which is kind of disappointing. Now, I did test it with my OWC, and it does work okay with it. So something in the TS4 is misreading what's available, and I'm not sure what's going on there. It might be CalDigit's fault. They're a great company too, so I don't want to knock them. Somehow the two aren't jiving. Anyway, hey, thanks. See ya.